Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Reign of Troy Radio, episode 456, coming to you on Thursday, October 27th. We're going to look ahead to Saturday night's matchup between the USC Trojans and the Arizona Wildcats in Tucson. Take your questions and so much more. As always, you can feel free to follow us on social media. We're at Reign of Troy on Twitter and Facebook. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there. Our email address is reignoftroy@fanside.com. I'm your host, Michael Castillo, along with my co-host, Alicia Artola.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. We are back after a bye week. We ended up taking a bye week, much needed, and we're a day late. The week has been a super hectic one on our end, but here we are. It is Thursday night, looking ahead to Saturday night. A couple days away from USC's return to the field for Game 8 in Week 9 already. Week 9. Can you believe it? It's been it's already Week 9.
It's unbelievable. I think we say this every year, and this year feels particularly unbelievable that it's been 9 weeks of the Lincoln Riley era playing actual football.
Yeah,
and it's been a really, really fun 9 weeks, and I'm really excited to see this team get back on the field after that bye week and go make a statement for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and this is going to be fascinating too because it's the last game before the the opening college football playoff rankings come out next week.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy to think about. The final game of October, the the legendary November comes up. During the Pete Carroll era, of course.
No loss November.
No loss November was a big deal. If SC goes through another no loss November, they'll be in the Pac-12 championship game. We'll see if they can get there. It's going to be a wild ride. The Pac-12 is anyone's game at this point. We'll talk about that more as we go here on the podcast. And as always, you guys can join us here on the podcast. If you're watching us live on YouTube, be sure to join us in the chat. Give us your thoughts and what's going through your mind as the Trojans get ready to play the Arizona Wildcats in Tucson. You can also leave a review over on Apple Podcasts if you listen to us there. 5 stars helps grow the show as well. And here on YouTube, we'd like you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, all of that stuff. Hit the notification bell. All those things you're supposed to say.
Comment.
Yeah, it all helps.
Yeah,
it all helps grow the show as well. Alicia, it's going to be a big episode, so let's just start with the news right away, shall we? We have to start with the craziest thing that I didn't expect to hear this week.
I wasn't on my bingo card.
No. Lincoln Riley talking about USC linebacker Tuipulotu Nomura, saying that he has played on a compound fracture. Quote, he broke his finger in the middle of a play this year, like compound, bone sticking out. He didn't tell anybody. He played 3 plays with the bone sticking out of his finger. What?
I have so many thoughts, and yet my brain just goes blank of like, excuse me? Say what now? Obviously, everyone is comparing this to Ronnie Lott.
Yeah,
it's a fitting comparison for sure. My first 2 thoughts were, I guess I have 3 thoughts on the matter once you get the whole who is he, Ronnie Lott, out of the way. Number 1, Tuipulotu Nomura as a high school recruit was definitely billed. They called him the Tasmanian Devil. He was definitely billed as just one of those dudes. Yeah. So like, if you had told me that someone on this football team this year would play with bones sticking out of their finger, he would have been on my short list, as unexpected as having to make that selection would have been. So there's that.
What does the short list include? Players who eat like raw meat between plays?
Well, like Porter Gustin would have been on my short list in previous years.
It's funny because as soon as they said that, I thought
Porter Gustin. Yeah.
What would he eat?
He would take like steamed chicken and like blend it in a blender with like broccoli and like carrots, and that would be his like shake for the morning. Crazy. I beyond what I can understand. So that was my first thought. Number 2 was, wow, that's like the kind of player that you want on defense. I have said in previous episodes that I don't mind seeing Tuipulotu Nomura on the field because I know that he's going to give it all 150% of what he's going to give, and I like that. But like my third thing is also it's 2022. Don't play with your bone sticking out of your finger. Like, I want you to take your own personal health and safety into account, and I want you to be responsible and go see a trainer and recognize that this is just a game and you don't need to do that. So like we need to have a balance, right, between you're a badass and also like you can still be a badass without like risking your finger.
Yeah, Steve Unger in the chat says the modern day Jack Youngblood, who Rams legend who famously played on a broken leg. Yeah, like it's the same thing.
Number 4 thought. Thank God the broadcast didn't catch this, because we would have video, and I don't want that in my life.
There is nothing I want to see less than a bone.
Yeah.
Remember when was it Kevin Ware, the guy from Louisville?
Ryan Powdrell.
Yeah, Powdrell.
Yeah,
2006
had
against Nebraska.
The leg, yeah.
But I don't remember that being like there wasn't bone. Was there?
I want to say I think I associate that one with bone, but I don't know. I've seen a lot of injuries where I've had to look away.
Yeah. Yikes. All right. Speaking of looking away on an injury, one of those was Jordan Addison against Utah, and did not look good for him. Lower body injury, of course, as they would say in the National Hockey League. But maybe not so bad. Let's talk about the injuries going into the Arizona game. He is on the questionable list, along with Eric Gentry and Raylan Goforth. Lincoln Riley said on Thursday that is going to be a, quote, down-to-the-wire decision. So consider them questionable, game-time decision, whatever label you want to put on it. Down to the wire is what Lincoln Riley says. That seemingly is a good thing, considering that Jordan Addison and Eric Gentry are two of the top stars on this team, right?
Yeah, and quite frankly, if it is a down-to-the-wire decision, I don't want them on the field. Like, no disrespect to Arizona. I think you do have to respect Arizona for a few reasons that we're going to talk about later. But if they're coming down to the wire, then let them sit and get them back next week and get them back without risking their future health and their current health and all of that. It's harder, I think, with Gentry and Goforth because those are two starters at linebacker, and you are in a position where you're digging into your depth chart at that position. So maybe that's the one where you say, if either of those guys, you're going to treat them less with the kid gloves as far as bringing them back. But I would prefer to be able to beat Arizona without those three to get them healthy for next week. And I think USC should be able to do that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what that means at linebacker. If there is no Gentry and Goforth, Rajon Davis, someone who can step in there at linebacker, and you can expect to see time from him. But yeah, in a perfect world, you can rest those guys a little bit more. For me, I think the biggest takeaway is they're not season-ending injuries. Yes. And that was the concern. There was definitely the concern with Jordan Addison when you saw how bad it looked in the moment against Utah. Eric Gentry, I don't remember seeing a specific play, but he is someone we've seen all year just, limping.
Well, we literally saw him limping on one leg.
Like pogo sticking over down the field. Yeah. But we've seen him limping off the field. We've seen him drag a shoulder. We've seen him do a bunch of things where it looks like he's just been battered and bruised. So if there's anyone who deserves an off week, it's these guys. But I think to me, the bigger point is that they're not season-ending injuries. And Arizona, not to bury the lead here, but not a game that you expect SC to be in a 4-quarter fight with. But you never know. It is a road game. We're going to talk about this later, but Rob Gronkowski is going to be there on the field. at Arizona Stadium. I don't know that it has the same power of the Red Bandana Nights at Boston College or the Two Fallen Utes last time. Not nearly the same dynamic, surely. Of course, not equating those things. But might have the zoo down at Tucson a little amped up on Saturday night. You never know.
Well, I mean, Arizona. This is one of the things we talk about with USC all the time, is that you're going to get everyone's best game, and Arizona's going to want to get somebody this year, and they have an offense that might be capable of getting someone this year if you come in and sleepwalk. So, yeah.
Yeah, and to go back to the injury stuff, questionable are those three guys, Addison, Gentry, and Goforth. But on a lighter note, Corey Foreman has been dealing with nagging injuries, according to Lincoln Riley, and he's expected to play. On the flip side of that, someone who is out is Devontae Jackson, who's sat practice all week and has not been out there.
Yeah, and we had talked about Devontae Jackson not playing against Utah, and it looks like he's dealing with some injury.
A leg injury, I believe.
Yeah, so that's unfortunate, but it happens, and fortunately USC has the cornerback bodies in there to deal with that, even though it's disappointing not to see that young talent out on the field. With Corey Foreman, it's really about giving this defense that extra oomph to overcome the tests that are coming in the next few weeks. So Arizona, this offense is going to be something an offense that could score on this USC defense. It would be very helpful if they had a breakout game from someone like Corey Foreman. It would be very helpful if they got breakout situations from Foreman in the future, the next 2-3 weeks as you lead up to Notre Dame and UCLA and all of those. Like, if he becomes a second half star, then your defense is in significantly better shape, because what did we say went wrong against Utah? They didn't get sacks. They weren't creating havoc plays, and that's literally what Corey Foreman was recruited to do. So
yeah,
someone to keep an eye on. But again, it's there's been a lot of talk around Foreman. It's time for that talk to start being turned into action.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing I wanted to bring up here was a tweet from Bryson Shaw's dad. Not usually a source of injuries or parents, but in a time where Lincoln Riley isn't necessarily always discussing these things, and we've looked for more clarity on things. This came out on Thursday. He tweeted, quote, "Finally, my number one son is just about 100% recovered from his quad tear that he suffered at the start of summer camp. Looking forward to watching him work his way back. #FightOn, #USC Trojans."
I am shocked that this tweet didn't get shared in our group chat with the Traveler Hates Thursdays and Keely Yor, because there have been many, many debates about whether or not fall camp is actually summer camp, is actually fall camp, is actually summer camp. And this might be something worth debating. What does he mean by summer camp? We're talking, is he putting in his
summer camp means summer workouts
or summer work? I mean,
it's fall
questions
camp,
were asked.
Fall. I prefer fall camp.
Yes, it's fall camp. Getting ready for fall. But either way, it is nice to sort of see this kind of thing. And I think people have been asking, like, where's Bryson Shaw? Well, he's dealing with a quad injury. That's certainly going to slow him down and limit his opportunities to get on the field. And that's what the second half of the season is for, is to see what some of those guys who have been limited get more opportunities.
Yeah. This makes a lot of sense to me in terms of the severity of an injury like that. Because I know there were questions. We had faced questions here on the show of why isn't he getting opportunities? And the thing that I kept going to is, I believe in the coaching staff enough at this point. They have shown that they are not distrustful, or they're not worthy of distrust when it comes to guys getting opportunity. If someone is surely sitting on the there's no reason to believe that someone is sitting on the bench who couldn't contribute. And if they're not playing, there's a reason they're not playing. Either they're not performing in practice or they're hurt. And in Bryson Shaw's case, he was hurt. So there's the answer that people have been looking for as well. All right, USC and Arizona locking horns on Saturday nights at Arizona Stadium, 4 p.m. on the Pac-12 network. Presumably USC's final game on the Pac-12 network. SC plays next week on ESPN against Cal, followed by the Colorado game on FS1. They would be an utter shock if the UCLA game was on the Pac-12 network. And we know the Notre Dame game will never be on the Pac-12 network. So this is it. This is it for the year. The USC and Arizona on the interconference network. The Wildcats 3-4 on the season and 1-3 in conference. Jed Fish now in year 2. He's 4-15 at the helm of the Wildcats. An interesting sort of tenure so far. I thought that it was a terrible hire to hire Jed Fish. I didn't think there was any hope for Arizona, and last year they were like, for a 1-11 team, they weren't terrible.
They were more feisty than 1-11.
Yeah, then you would imagine 1-11 to be, right?
Yeah. 1-11 you imagine is hopeless. And that was very much we're 1-11, but we're fighting and we're trying and maybe we're building something here. Yeah.
And I think there was a 1-11 where if you were an Arizona fan, you could squint and see the future, right?
Yes.
And so far this year, Arizona has been pretty much a chalk team. They've beaten the teams below them and they're losing to the teams above them. And I think that if you're Arizona so far at this point in their rebuild, you take that.
They're recruiting well. That's the big thing.
They absolutely are recruiting well. They got a big win over FCS powerhouse North Dakota State. It sounds weird to hail about their FCS win, but for Arizona, given where they are, that is an FCS win that matters. I think we all agreed North Dakota State is like a middling Power 5 team. What do they translate to be like? I don't know, like a Northwestern-ish.
Would Rice beat North Dakota State?
No.
I mean, Big T in the chat said they were not Colorado bad.
Yeah,
they were like, well, Colorado wouldn't have beat North Dakota State this year. I can tell you that much.
No, exactly. And so, yeah, the way I look at it, Arizona is an interesting team, and really, you break it down even further. This is an offense that can compete with anyone in the country. It's a defense that, still looks like the 1-11 record that they had last year. Let's just say it. Let's get to it. The Wildcats are 87th in SP+, 52nd in offense. That 52nd, I think, doesn't do them justice of how potent they are in offense, by the way. 113th in defense. And why is this? Because their passing offense is 5th in the country. 5th. No one else in FBS has more 20-yard pass plays than the Arizona Wildcats. They're tied with Ohio for the most 20-yard pass plays with 40. Of course, led by Jaden Delara, the transfer from Washington State. He is slinging it all over the yard. 2,200 yards, almost 2,300 at this point. 19 TDs, 7 interceptions, 150.4 passer rating, but really has come to his own the last few games, even the last 2 games where, Arizona has struggled against 2 really good teams, Oregon and Washington, 2 losses in which they gave up 1 billion points on defense. Arizona on offense has been great. Last 3 games. Delara, 11-1 touchdown interception ratio. 1 interception in the last 126 pass attempts. They have a wide receiver core led by Jacob Cowing, Dorian Singer, and McMillan, that I'm not going to botch his first name.
Don't overthink it. Tetoro. Don't overthink it. It's just Tetoro. It's easier than you think it is.
I think I'm literally reading the pronunciation guide, and you're getting that wrong.
Tataro.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Okay.
Not what
Yeah,
you said.
there's
See what I'm saying?
it's one of those
T-Mac.
ones where
We're going
there's
with T-Mac.
okay, T-Mac.
Yeah, Cowie and Singer and T-Mac. If USC does not have the best wide receiver core in the conference, it's Arizona. Cowie and Singer is second and third in the conference in receiving, 53 catches and 41 catches there, 737 yards, 605, 9 touchdowns total between the two. They have a running game that's a 300 backfield between Jonah Coleman, DJ Williams, and Michael Wiley, who injured his oblique against Oregon, missed the Washington game. We'll see what his status is on Saturday. But this is an offense that can score points. It's an offense that I think USC has to worry about, given that the Utah game was one where the defense couldn't stop a roly-poly. It's going to be interesting to see what USC does on defense here. But of course, the flip side is that you talk about this offense being, number one in 20-yard pass plays. The defense, even worse than the offense, is good. 113th SP plus, like I mentioned, right? 124th in scoring defense, giving up 36 points a game. 129th in yards per play, 6.94 yards per play. Alicia, I did the math. In the last 10 seasons, there have only been 3 Pac-12 schools with the worst yards per play allowed average against them. 3. 2018 Oregon State, 2016 ASU, and 2013 Cal. It's bad. It's bad, especially bad on the ground. 120th in rush defense, 128th in rushing yards per carry, giving up 5.81 yards per carry. Again, past 10 seasons, only 4 Pac-12 teams have had a worse yards per carry against. One of those teams being a team that SC plays in a couple of weeks in 2022 Colorado. But 2022 Colorado, 2020 Arizona, again, 2018 Oregon State, and then 2016 Cal. Like, the 5th worst in the last 10 years, this rush defense. It's bad. It's really bad. And historically bad when you look at the advanced numbers. 127th in opportunity rates.
Defensive opportunity.
Yeah, rate. Defensive opportunity rate. Like, it's real bad. 120th in sack rate. They don't get after the quarterback either on that defensive line. Like, yeah. Offense good. Defense bad. Real bad.
Well, and there's a reason they are where they are this season, with a losing record, because their offense has some life to it, but it can't keep up with the other offenses in the conference, because it's just their defense is just too bad. It's just too weak, and there's an argument to be made that, like, maybe we cut them some slack for giving up a bunch of points to offenses like Washington and Oregon, who can definitely put up points. But when you're giving up 49 points to Cal, I have questions about your defense that are stronger than.
It's not just 49 points to Cal; it's 354 rushing yards to Cal.
Yes, yeah. So this Arizona team is reminiscent to what a lot of the sort of weaker Pac-12 teams over the last 10 years have been, as you've pointed out, that they're on the defensively, they're on that bottom tier of the Pac-12 defenses of the last 10 years. They're very reminiscent of many a team that we've seen from Arizona, where they have a dynamic quarterback, they have some playmakers on offense, but unless you let those guys cook for the entire game, they're not going to be able to keep up with you, because their defense is not going to stop your offense at all. So once again, this game comes down to USC's defense getting a couple stops, which this kind of plays into USC's hands. I think that Arizona is the kind of offense that could score, a few touchdowns on them, but the havoc plays, the negative plays this defense is capable of producing are exactly the kind of plays that trip up this offense. And you only need to trip them up on a couple of drives before you're ahead by 2 touchdowns, and then you roll. So when you have the talent that USC has on offense going against this defense, you should look at it as scoring on every drive. This could be another game where we look at it and say, well, run the ball and you're going to run for 400 yards and it's going to be fine. You also don't need to run the ball necessarily. You can just destroy them in the passing game too, because that's how good your passing game is. That's how good Caleb Williams is. So it's hard to see where this Arizona defense creates an opportunity for an upset, because that's what Arizona is going to be looking for, right? They're going to be trying to create an opportunity for an upset. But in order to do that, it's almost like you need the other side to give it to you, which is to say a USC offense that has not been prone to turnovers suddenly commits a bunch of turnovers. USC special teams unit that has sort of been playing on the edge all year gives up special teams touchdowns or something like that. Like, it really needs to be a catastrophic kind of performance from USC. And it coming out of a bye week, that would be so disappointing to see from this team, to underestimate an opponent that way, to come out of a bye week without the fire that you should have had from the hurt of losing the Utah game, all of those kinds of things. It's almost to an unbelievable degree of catastrophe that I would have to sit here and imagine how that sort of happens. It just, it's hard to, it doesn't sort of form in my brain. It doesn't follow.
I think there's a world in which this game gives SC fits.
Yes.
But I think the problem for Arizona here is the timing. I think that this ideally would have been for Arizona the week before SC plays Utah.
Yeah.
I think that,
or the week before USC plays UCLA or something like that.
Yes, and I think that we can sit here and say, "Ooh, potential trap game." We can sit here and talk about those kind of things. That's not the case here. SC plays Cal next week. SC's coming off of bye week. Arizona's coming off of bye week. The ick factor for SC in this game is, road game, just the general road game. But SC's coming off a road game against Utah, the most hostile environment they'll face all season. And they had 500 and something offensive yards and scored 42 points and looked the best they have on offense and, arguably all season. So I have a hard time in seeing it. And I think that if Caleb Williams comes out here and, repeats what he did in the Oregon State game and maybe actually turns the ball over. But this Arizona defense isn't a defense that generates turnovers. They forced 7 turnovers all year, won a game. That's not going to be enough to catch SC off guard here,
Unless Caleb Williams comes out of the bye week and just decides to take every play like he did that one play against Oregon State where he was just YOLO'd it up into the end zone. And that's not who Caleb Williams is. And I think that we came out of that Oregon State game saying this is a problem if this is who Caleb Williams is on the road, but he's spent the next few weeks showing us that was just the most off day of off days. It was just literally
Utah game put all of that to bed.
All of that to bed. Yes. Yeah. He's too good of a quarterback to do what he did against Oregon State again against this Arizona defense, which, Oregon State's defense puts this Arizona State defense to shame. So it doesn't, again, I don't want to disregard Arizona. I don't want to overlook them because, as you've said, this could be a situation where it's 21-21 at halftime or 28-21 at halftime. It could be one of those weird games where Arizona is able to keep up for half. But I can't imagine this Arizona team is able to keep up with USC's offense going the other way, knowing what we know about USC's defense too. Now, if they're down Eric Gentry and down Raylan Goforth and they're starting, if Tuasivi Nomura and his broken finger are maybe not at their best and Shane Lee gets caught in coverage and things happen on the defense, but we have also seen that this defense is a very resilient defense. And to imagine that they're going to give up the 60 points that this Arizona offense would need to score, I just can't see it happening.
So here's the world. The case for Arizona in this game is yes. Gentry doesn't play. Goforth doesn't play. SC has to put, Shane Lee in positions where he's vulnerable over the middle of the field in coverage. We know Arizona wants to throw the ball vertically. That ends up being a liability. Arizona has the same success on offense that Utah did, if not, we'll just say the same success, right? Now, the flip side of that is, I don't think there's any way that SC doesn't have the same success that they did against the Utah game and more. And it's the and more that's the problem there.
So, and okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you said, what is the scenario where Arizona has the leg up in this game? The scenario is really that Caleb Williams gets injured, knock on all the wood, right?
Okay, you don't have to go that far.
But even then, do I think that Miller Moss couldn't come in here against a defense that doesn't generate pressure with an offensive line that's had another 2 weeks to get healthy? That's what I'm saying. And that Miller Moss couldn't move this offense with Lincoln Riley as his offensive coordinator.
Right.
And also, let's say you have to go down to your third string quarterback in a nightmare scenario.
Okay, now this is weird hypotheticals at this point.
No. What I'm saying is, if something goes wrong with quarterback, just Travis Dye gets 40 carries then, and you win the game. This should be a situation where your plan B, C, D, and E all win you the game. Maybe if you get down to plan F, you're in trouble. But
the point is, I think there's a world in which SC gives up 40 points here.
Yes.
But I think that the chances of that happening while SC doesn't score themselves, I think is not likely, and that's why SC in Bill Connolly's numbers has an 84% win probability. So
yeah,
there you go.
Because even if you got big Jaden DeLora, we know can come up with big plays.
Yeah.
T-Mac. I'm psyching myself up
Just
with the dang.
It's very simple.
I had it in my head though. I had it. Totoro.
It's right. You're doing what my mom does with your last name.
I am.
And just skip it then.
Totoro. No, it's about cadence. I need to figure out the cadence. Whatever. McMillan could make a couple of really big plays, and that could absolutely happen. This tight end, Tanner McLaughlin, could, I don't know, do 200 yards. Why are we talking about these incredible hypotheticals? But it just, basically we've broken this down. The too long didn't read situation for this is Arizona might put up points. It won't matter.
Yes. Now, this will be a different preview when we preview Colorado in a couple weeks. Because that one we can just omit the whole offensive side of it. They could score for a little bit. That point will be not included in the Colorado preview.
Yes.
And Down Panoy in the chat says Plan F. And SC ain't Ferrari. This is true. Okay. All right, let's get to the over-under picks going into USC and Arizona. All right, Alicia, you have a lead because apparently you had a good week a couple weeks ago against Utah. You are now 26-25. I am 25-26. What is your first over-under?
All right. One of the things we glossed over in our little preview there was the presence of a former Trojan on this Arizona team. Hunter Echols is playing for the Wildcats. He actually leads them in tackles for loss and sacks this season. He has 6.5 tackles for loss, but he had 0 against Oregon and Washington. So, and those are the last 2 games for them. So, I'm setting the line at just, will Hunter Echols have a tackle for loss in this game? We're going 0.5 tackles for loss for Hunter Echols.
This is an easy over, yes.
Okay.
Revenge game for Hunter Echols, yes. He's getting that tackle for loss.
Okay.
Yeah.
USC doesn't give up a lot of tackles for loss.
Arizona doesn't have many, period.
Mm-hmm.
But in home game for him,
that's fair. Yeah,
playing against his former team, he's getting the tackle for loss. Let's be real here. He's getting it. My first over/under is 233.5 rushing yards for the Trojans. Why is it 233? Because that is their season high, 233 so far this season. Can they set a new season high? Arizona, of course, has allowed 233 plus 3 times, including 306 to Oregon, 354 to Cal, and 283 to FCS Superpower, North Dakota State.
So normally my instinct would be to take the under here because in order to get high rushing totals, USC has to actually commit to running the ball all the time. But in this case, and maybe I'm just living off of one too many memories of said Ware going off against the Wildcats, I have a feeling that Raleek Brown, this defense is set up for him to break off a couple and for USC to get a lead that they decide to protect by just running the ball in the second half.
There you go.
And clearing the benches and just doing that. So I am going to go with the over on this.
Okay.
I like that this is a rushing yards in general question and not a Travis Dye rushing yards question because for that, I might take the under because, again...
Well, I wouldn't expect him to get 233.
No. But like if you had had like a 99.5 rushing yards for Travis Dye, I would have just sat here and moaned and like, come on, you can't... Don't do this to me. Don't make me take the under on that one.
Yeah, I think that's a good play. I think that's very good rationale, and I think that if I was making the pick, probably what I would do too. I don't think 233 is that high of a line. I didn't put it at 300. You know what I mean?
Yes, but the scary thing about USC is that we have seen that the run game is not necessarily the stat monster that it could be.
Yes.
Because the game is so much in Caleb Williams' hands at all times.
I agree, but I think this is a game where SC could potentially score on every drive.
Yes. Which if that happens...
And if that happens, you're just going to get that in terms of the overall production of things. It'll all add up,
if
right?
Miller Moss is in the game in the third quarter, as I would prefer to happen under positive circumstances, then the handoffs will come.
They're getting the 233. Yeah. All right. What's your next one?
All right. I am going with 3.5 sacks for USC, knowing that they got 0 sacks against Utah and Oregon State earlier this season. But in every other game that they've played, they got 4 sacks against Rice, and they've had 5 sacks in every other game that they've played. Arizona has allowed an average of 1.7 sacks per game this season. They're sort of more in the range of like giving up 2 sacks a game. But when USC gets to the quarterback, they get to the quarterback and they go. So 3.5 sacks for this USC defense.
3.5 sacks. You always lull me into these, and it always sounds like a crazy high line, right? So I go right here and I'm pulling up Arizona's stats. What are they at in sack rate? 30th in the country.
They don't give up a ton.
Yeah. Delara can elude too.
I think he gets the ball out quickly too.
Yeah, 3.5. Give me the under.
Okay.
And here the rationale, the 2 times SC has had 0. It was the last 2 road games, so it's another road game. So give me the under, but I wouldn't be shocked if they pull out that over again, consistently like it has with you on the sacks there.
Yeah.
My next one's going to be over under 334.5 passing yards for Arizona. Can the Wildcats get to their average? That's what their average is in passing yards. Of course, the Trojans allowed a season high 424 at Utah last time out. Arizona has weirdly Delara has thrown for 400 yards 3 times. Every other game, 299 or fewer. So, it's not like they're really close to this 334 number. That's just how the math bears out. It's not necessarily indicative of how many yards they actually are getting in a game. But, yeah, I think that could make it interesting for your pick here. Over under 334.5.
Well, this is tough because I guess the question really is how much did Utah lay the blueprint for the exploitation of this pass defense with what they did with Cam Rising and Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah.
The thing that's holding me off here, because I do think that this Arizona offense could put up yards and put up points, but at the same time, that Utah performance was the exception to what we have generally seen from this USC defense in terms of being able to get stops and being able to get off the field. And part of me respects Cam Rising just too much to say that that wasn't partly a reflection of that Utah offensive line, Cam Rising, that entire offense and who they are and what they do. So I feel like it's just optimistic Alicia all over the place here. But like, I think I'm going under on this because I think that of everybody, I think that USC's defense has more to prove than anybody else on this team. I think they're going to have come out of this bye week with more to prove and more of a wanting to make a statement. So
it's also a high number. Like they could give up 320 passing yards.
Yeah.
And you can feel like SC got gashed at times. And still get the under on this too. So that's it. Wait, you're taking the over?
I'm taking the under. Oh, yeah. See, again, this makes me think I screwed up before.
Yeah, she wrote.
I wrote over. No, I'm taking the under. I'm taking the under.
Okay. All right. Next one. What's your last over under?
All right. I am going with a points one, which I know that isn't always the favorite, but I do think it's an interesting situation here. 49.5 points for USC. So Arizona has given up 49 points to all three of their conference opponents.
I know.
So far.
I'm very upset at you.
I stole that from you.
Yes.
Yeah. But I noticed it before I saw what you wrote in the rundown. So take it for what it is. Oregon scored 49, Washington scored 49, and Cal scored 49. So this is going to be an interesting test for USC's offense in comparison to those.
Yeah.
USC hasn't scored more than 45, I think, since they put 66 on Rice. Now, only 45 points, only 42 points. It's not the end of the world. It's a great USC offense. But it would be fun to see this USC team put 50 on somebody. And this feels like a defense they could do it on. So I'm going 49.5 points for USC over or under.
So I'm very upset at you about this. Let me just clarify. A little inside baseball, how it works. Usually, when we're doing a rundown, one of us inevitably ends up writing more of the rundown than the other person. And it goes back and forth. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's you. This one was a rundown that I put together for the most part. And I handed it over to you this afternoon. And I said, oh, you just need to come up with your over-unders and that's it. And so in the rundown, I had noticed, and like I note down the little stats that I want to mention, highlight them, and whatnot. So where I write down what my score prediction is, I write a little note that I had a little thing on it, and it says Arizona has allowed exactly 49 points in each of their last three conference losses. Cal, Oregon, and Washington.
You have Cal, Oregon, and Oregon.
You don't have to tell people that I messed up. And so I was like, I'm proud of myself for like having this little nugget there, and that's going to skew what my score prediction that we'll get to soon is. And then you just had to use it for an over-under, and now I'm torn because I had this whole like little speech plan for my score prediction, and now that is all out the window. So in my mind, my body, my soul all says over.
But
there's part of me that's like, but Arizona continues to allow exactly 49 points. So why pick anything else but SC scoring exactly 49 points? So give me the under.
Okay, you're taking the under by 0.5 points. I love that. I love that for you. I love that for me too.
Yeah, so that gives you the over.
Yep.
Gives you the over on 49.5. All right, my last one is over under 1.5 Jaden DeLara interceptions. He's thrown 7 this year, as I talked about. 3 of those came in week 2 against Mississippi State and the Fighting Mike Leaches. In the last 3 weeks, as I mentioned before, 11-1 touchdown interception ratio, 126 pass attempts, only 1 pick. He's been pretty clean. Will he get to 2 interceptions? That seems like a lot. The Trojans, of course, still number 1 in turnover margin, number 2 in interceptions forced. Over under 1.5 Jaden DeLara interceptions.
I'm going to go under on this.
Okay.
Just because I think that the turnovers have clearly slowed down a little bit for USC.
Yes.
I think that USC's defense can still live with the sort of havoc game plan, but the turnovers are just going to be harder to come by, I think, just with the law of averages happening. I wouldn't be surprised if Jaden DeLara threw an interception, but I just don't want to bet on him throwing 2 interceptions, especially when, USC could get turnovers by also forcing fumbles. We've seen they're very good at that. So, I think that Jaden DeLara will try to be very careful in this game too. So taking that under, but wouldn't be surprised at all if that over hit.
It was a really tough line to put together because I hate putting together 0.5 lines.
Yeah.
Because it's just yes or no. And I think that those can be boring sometimes. And mind you, this is not a precursor to what our next one is, because our next one genuinely interesting. An exception to the 0.5 rule.
Yeah.
But
sometimes the yes or no questions in over under are the really interesting ones. But when it's a stat one,
when it's a stat like interceptions, it's not that interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So I had to put it to 1.5. So yeah, I think that it could go either way, but the under is probably the good pick there. Yeah. All right, which leads us into another over under that we've gotten here from the chat in Utah. I mean, in YouTube.
Utah.
I had the U there and the T sound.
Yeah.
YouTube. Here on the YouTubes, from Madame Panoy that says 0.5, over under 0.5. Caleb Williams led drives in the fourth quarter. See, that is genuinely interesting. That's a good 0.5 line. Caleb Williams led drives fourth quarter. Over under. Over is a yes. Under is a no.
I'm going bold here.
I don't know what bold means.
Based on the way we've been talking, I should take the under because I don't think Arizona is going to be in this game. But we've also seen that Lincoln Riley really doesn't like to take Caleb Williams out that early. Even like the lead could be 14 points if Arizona's putting up some points. So I'm going over. I think he will lead at least one drive in the fourth quarter.
See, okay.
Which to me feels bold.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so you just did something that you made me figure out, something that my brain was doing the other way. My brain was viewing this as the inverse.
Oh.
You have it right. You have it right.
Yeah.
My brain was viewing this as the inverse. So I'm like, what do you mean it's bold? It's bold to say one? Like, I don't think it's bold. No. Yes. I get what you're saying. Okay. My brain was like saying Caleb Williams not let drives.
Gotcha.
Like that.
Yeah.
Even though I know that that's not the case. Yeah. Okay. So since this is not one that you or I made, we're free to take a different pick here. I'm going to take the under. I'm going to give me the under on this.
Okay.
Which means that Caleb Williams will not play a down in the fourth quarter.
That's what I think. That's how we would interpret that, right?
Yes. Yeah. All right. Game prediction time. Bill Connolly's numbers we talked about before. 84% win probability for the Trojans. His numbers say that SC wins 41-24. Vegas has the line as of us putting together this rundown. It's USC minus 15.5, over under of 76.5. Alicia, what's your score?
I just changed mine right now.
Uh-oh.
Okay. I've got USC 55, Arizona 28. I had Arizona 32 or 33 and decided to move it down because I'm going to give some more credit to USC's defense. I think they can get the job done while also giving up 28 points, and I won't feel bad about it. I think USC's offense should be out to make a statement and should be out to put as much points on the board as possible. So 55-28.
All right, good football score. Solidly a football score. All right, and mine's not too different. I'm going. We talked about before the 49 points thing. SC has to score exactly 49 points to keep the mojo alive against Arizona. Cal, Oregon, Washington all scored 49 points. SC scoring 49 points again, exactly 49. Arizona 24. 24. I hemmed and hawed about making it 31, but I put it back at 24.
And like part of my brain is also now screaming at me to like be bolder and drop it to 18 or something stupid like that, because like
be bolder, Alicia.
I like this defense. I also think I trust this defense a little bit too much at times. And I also think that we trust this defense not enough sometimes. And also they're going to be playing without some key players potentially. So I don't know where I'm at with this. Either way, I think USC is going to win comfortably, and whatever the score comes out to be will be what it is.
So, but I just want to bring something up really quick. We've talked about a lot of stats. A lot of stats for SC and UCLA point to 2005, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the best since 2005 of this. SC is doing this for the first time since 2005.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing is happening for UCLA too. Like a lot of their stats are first time they were 6-0 since 2005, I think. These numbers, the scores in the 50s in Tucson reminds me that in 2005, Arizona beat UCLA 52-14. Number 7 UCLA.
That would be pretty funny.
So, like, is there a world where, and that was a 3-win Arizona team. Is there a world in which Arizona, the one game that the divine intervention all comes together, is this one? No, I don't think so. But
I mean, there is a world where that happens. It's just like 1 in a billion universes. So, is it technically possible? Absolutely. Did we just speak it into existence? Yes, we did. Are the pitchforks and torches going to come out for us in the CarCast after it happens? Yes, of course. We expect that. But it's just, 1 in a billion.
I just want to go back to the 2005 8-0 UCLA going into that game feeling like on top of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then losing 52-14. We got to have Jake on at some point and ask him what was going through his mind.
But this was like the classic, like, we saw this with Pete Carroll teams too, where, they'd be on top of the world.
52
That's
to 14.
true. Like, even the Stanford loss, which was shocking, there were like extenuating circumstances that contributed to that loss. Yeah, USC didn't tend to get blown out.
Booty pulled to a CV Nomura and stayed in the game.
Yeah, and stayed in the game with a bone sticking out of his finger.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. Got an email from Tom in the Cayman Islands who says, "Hi, Michael and Alicia. I'm not sure if my expectations have sunk so low due to the Helton era that a 1-point loss on the road to a good team didn't even leave me disappointed. The Helton era always left me with the sense that even if the team was winning during the season, they would get dismantled once they played a good team like Utah. Not only did USC show that they can play well in a tough environment, but Utah went for 2 in their last score. That's something that usually only road teams do because they feel lucky to be able to keep through 60 minutes. To me, that's Whittingham saying he doesn't think his team could keep going at that pace with USC. Thanks, Tom in the Cayman Islands." Tom, you are exactly correct. This is exactly how I feel about that game. I talked about it in the Fallout episode. Like, honestly, like, I feel better about USC after that Utah game than before. And part of it is because, there was part of me feeling squeamish about the Caleb Williams thing. Does he struggle in big games? Because you can look at the numbers from the Oregon, State. No, from his Oklahoma tenure.
Yeah.
Against Oregon State previously this year, but against Baylor last year, against Iowa State last year. Like, there were times where he played good defenses and he struggled. And I know that quarterbacks are going to struggle against good defenses more than they're going to struggle against bad defenses. But at the same time, like, there's lingering doubt sometimes when you see things like that. He obliterated all doubt against Utah. And then there's just general doubt, like I talked about before. Like, I predicted SC to lose to Utah before the season because I didn't think that SC was going to be this good in year one because it's year one. They've got so many new players. They've got all these transfers. Like, it's hard to get everyone to gel. And Lincoln Riley has to win Coach of the Year. It's in some sort of category for what he's been able to do.
We've got a question about that coming up.
Yeah, just because of all the pieces that he's put together. And so, yeah, I think that you leave that game a 1-point loss where you only trail by 1 point because, just like Tom said, Whittingham knew that was his best opportunity to win the game. I wouldn't have done it if I was him, but I could see why he did it, and he did it because SC continued to score on offense, and we're doing to Utah's defense what Utah was doing to SC's defense.
Yeah, I think Tom hit the nail on the head. I think also you just have to look at that game and realize that it was not the losses that we saw of the Hilton era. It was an opponent that you were in a hostile territory against a good opponent, playing with a purpose behind them. Also, I mean, we talked a lot about the bad calls that were made in that game, but I think we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the injuries that happened in the middle of that game. Jordan Addison suffers what looks like a devastating season-ending injury on the sideline. Eric Gentry has to come out of that game on one leg. And I think you can look at it and say those are in the top two players of importance on each side of the ball for USC. Tuli Tuipulotu probably outranks Eric Gentry in terms of importance to the defense, but Eric Gentry is high up there. Losing him was huge. Jordan Addison, number one receiver, losing him is huge. And so I think that there were a lot of things where you can look at it and treat them like sliding doors moments where, if this one little thing goes different, if that call doesn't get made, or if this guy doesn't get injured, or, one little change in the history of that game and the result changes. And that's not to let anyone off the hook for losing. That's not to say it was okay to lose or anything like that. But I just think you look at it and go, that's football. That happens. Yeah. That's sports. That you didn't lose that game because you weren't prepared. You lost the game because, things went wrong and you lost the game.
You want to talk about sliding doors moments? Go back to the Oregon State game in the kneel-on nudge, right? For all intents and purposes, SC should have lost the Oregon State game. They win it. For all intents and purposes, SC should have beaten Utah. They lose it.
Yeah, it happens.
Where they are right now, I think is probably just a fair point. SC is 6-1. This is probably where they should be.
Yeah.
Given how those two games played out. But yeah, and things tend to even out in the end, and maybe they did in those two games. But
what I think is going to be the most interesting, and it's going to be hard to tell, except from a mentality standpoint, because the next 3 weeks are not the most challenging in terms of opposition, right? So the mental battles these next 3 weeks are going to matter a lot more than the on the field battles necessarily. It's how you respond to the way you lost to Utah, because you're going to have to expect to lose every once in a while. It's how do you respond to the loss that proves that you are a team that can really challenge and deal with adversity and go on to bigger and better things. So that's what I'm looking for from that loss. It was not a surprise to me that USC lost in a win-loss sort of tabulation. And I think that's why I think people with sense get that, that loss was not the end of the world. We've seen losses from USC over the last few years that felt way more the end of the world than that.
Yeah, and that Utah one, certainly not one that has egg on your face, as I tend to say. Does not for SC. We got a question on YouTube from SJ at this point. Who is the Pac-12 Coach of the Year? You mentioned that we could discuss this earlier. I mean, that there'd be a question about this. And I think there's only two answers, right?
There are only two answers. There might be three answers when all is said and done, but there are only two answers. It's Lincoln Riley and it's Dan Lanning.
Yes.
Now, I think Oregon can make the argument for Dan Lanning from the perspective of, yes, he got his ass kicked against Georgia, but it does take, for a first-time head coach taking over a new program with their own sense of transfers and all that kind of stuff, to then rally and recover and still have that belief and buy-in to be able to then go on to where they are now in the season. I think that's very admirable. At the same time, I will go full bore to argue for Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley dealt with off-season drama of a degree that is just insane. Rebuilt this roster by 50%, like lost 50% of last year's players, brought in a whole host of transfers, had to spend the summer onboarding all of those players, onboarding freshmen, all of that kind of stuff. And then comes in, and his only loss of the season is by 1 point on the road in a hostile environment under circumstances where you were dealing with important players' injuries and questionable penalties. Like, to me, what Lincoln Riley has done to so quickly establish and put his brand on USC, to have players buy in so quickly, that's Coach of the Year stuff for me. When all is said and done, if UCLA recovers from that loss to Oregon, Chip Kelly can be in the conversation if he gets UCLA to the Pac-12 title, which I think is still on the board for them. But to me, it's very clearly the pecking order for me is Lincoln Riley, Dan Lanning, and Chip Kelly.
Yeah, I think, first of all, you have to understand what a Coach of the Year award is not about who the best coach is. It is about who is the coach that overcame adversity, overcame expectations, or had to do something that wasn't expected, right? Or isn't normal. And I think that the only two guys currently that stand for that are Lanning and Riley. And I think Lanning's case right now, if there's a midseason one, I think you can absolutely give it to him, based on, remember what we talked about after the SC lost 50-6, 50 to 6, 52 to 6,
56 to 52 to 6, yeah, to Alabama,
whatever the hell it was.
Yeah.
We sat there in the parking lot in an Arlington Whataburger saying that this guy just isn't fit to coach. And I think that if you're an Oregon fan, you could sit there and, after they get absolutely destroyed by Georgia, maybe you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, what did we do?
Yeah.
And clearly they decided that wasn't going to be the moment that defined them, and they were going to end up playing some of the best football in the country since then. And so I think that puts you in position to win a Coach of the Year award. I think the problem for SC, the thing that Lincoln Riley, while I think that what he has done is incredible, the problem is I don't know how many people are going to truly take it in for what it is, because there were a lot of SC fans and a lot of people around the country who thought a lot of SC going into the season, who put their expectations extremely high at the beginning. And when you put these Coach of the Year awards are about surpassing expectations. And so if your expectations were that SC was going to make the playoff, then there's nothing that Lincoln Riley has done to make him Coach of the Year. He's doing what he's supposed to do. And doing what you're supposed to do means you don't win a Coach of the Year award. And I think it is nothing more than incredible that SC has put together a roster of all these transfers. But there are also a lot of people who don't think that. There's a lot of people who look at it and say, well, he has the benefit of the transfer portal that no one else had. Before, coaches in, Nick Saban in 2007 didn't have the transfer portal when he was in his first year at Alabama to do those things. And so then you just can't compare him and Lincoln Riley in year one. And I think that to some of that point, there's a fairness there, because, Nick Saban couldn't bring in the duo of Caleb and Mario Williams, right? At the same time, I just go back to, yes, he's allowed to bring in all these players, but also that's just more egos.
Yes.
That's more guys you have to find room for.
And
That's more guys you're replacing. Like I go back to the example of how many times have the Lakers done this, where they bring in all this incredible talent in the offseason, and then they end up looking like absolute stooges because they can't get it to work.
Yes. I mean, that is what I am most impressed about with Lincoln Riley. I think it's really easy to say, oh, he got the transfer portal, but like, you brought in the best player from Oregon's offense. You brought in the best players from Oklahoma's offense. You brought in the best players from Pitt's offense, and you asked them all to work together, and like, they've been seamless. But
right.
Somebody not Travis Dye, who had come in looking to be the star and being great, but not being the focal point of this offense, could have set the team on fire. Like, there are a million reasons why this team could have fallen apart before now. I also think that you're spot on about saying that it's about turning over expectations. And the thing that Dan Lanning has going for him that I would push back on is that when you lose to Georgia 49-3, your expectations reset. Everyone drops you out of the rankings, blah, blah, blah. So now, they're playing the best football of anybody that's been playing. Well, okay, they beat FCS Eastern Washington. They beat a bad BYU team. They beat a Washington State team that USC, that they barely beat a bad, they barely beat a Washington State team that USC also beat. They gave up as many points to Stanford as USC gave up to Stanford. They beat an Arizona team, and now they've beaten a UCLA team at home. That, like, there's only one impressive win on that. One impressive win that is more impressive than anything USC has done. The difference is that USC, people look at how USC beat Stanford and go, oh man, the defense gave up so many points. It's the same game. So USC is being evaluated based on the expectations that we came in with USC, where Oregon got to come in at a 0 point and has now been rising to they're playing the best football in the nation, which quite frankly, they're not. They're a good team, but like I'm also just gonna come out like they don't compare to what we've seen from Tennessee. They don't compare even to what we've seen from Clemson, and I'm a Clemson hater. Like, these are all just things that you have to sort of push back on.
You think there's at least five teams that are playing better football right now than Oregon is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. I would put Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, and Alabama ahead of Oregon.
Okay.
And Oklahoma State. Sorry, and TCU and Oklahoma State.
Okay. All right. Fair. So they're ranked 8th right now, and you would say that you'd basically keep them there even without the Georgia loss?
Well, without the Georgia loss, we would be talking about resume.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm talking about where they are right. I'm talking about the
without the Georgia loss.
I'm not talking about any particular loss. I'm talking about how they are playing right now
If you took the Georgia game out of the equation.
I'm not necessarily taking the Georgia
game. No. I'm just saying, like, if you took the Georgia game out of the equation and this was an undefeated Oregon team that had beaten the teams that they've beaten so far, I think TCU would have the argument to be ranked ahead of them. Tennessee, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, all of them would have a better resume than what you have seen from Oregon so far. But Oregon is now the new darling of college football, the same way UCLA was the new darling of college football after this is why the rankings are, I mean, it's hard because we're looking at an incomplete picture. Like, is this win over UCLA very, very impressive for Oregon? Or by the end of the season, is UCLA going to collapse? Or is UCLA going to end up winning the Pac-12 and then it's a really impressive win? The BYU win is now completely different from what we expected it to be. All of these things for every team. USC's win over Fresno State is a lot less impressive than we thought it was in the moment because Fresno State has completely fallen on their face.
Sure.
All of these things sort of come through. That's why I just think that judging these things right now at midseason, it's hard to judge, especially when.
But that's why I like things like I know it's foolproof. I mean, not foolproof, but like the eye test, and just by the eye test, Oregon the last few weeks has like surely been like looked like a top 5 team, and credit to them for bouncing back from a situation where they easily could have just gotten the life beaten out of them in week one. And for them to bounce back with a first-time head coach, I think is a testament to Dan Lanning. And yes, he should get Coach of the Year praise for it. So, yeah.
But by the end of the season, Lincoln Riley will win Coach of the Year I will say he should win Coach of the Year if he wins the Pac-12. If Dan Lanning wins the Pac-12, then there will be a very, very good argument for him to be Coach of the Year. These awards
come out before the championship game.
Before the Pac-12 championship game?
Yes, it comes out the day before.
Okay, so well then, it's going to be based on who is in the Pac-12 title game.
But if they both win out, I think that Lanning wins it.
If Oregon is in the Pac-12 title game and USC is in the Pac-12 title game,
I think Lanning
I agree with you that Lanning will win it, and I will say that Riley deserves to win it.
I will say they were both deserving, and
they shouldn't release that award until after the Pac-12 title game has been decided.
That's probably fair.
Yeah.
Stephen in the chat says biggest worry or concern with Arizona. And I think that it's USC's defense. Can they bounce back after the Utah game? And if they're going to be if they end up being without Gentry and Raylan Goforth, what does that mean for the linebacking core? We talked about Shane Lee at length now. He's been vulnerable in pass coverage. Well, now SC's going up against the offense that has the most 20-yard pass plays of any team in the country. Like, is that going to be a problem? And this is an offense that has a very good tight end, maybe not Dalton Kincaid good, but Tanner McLaughlin is pretty good so far. 23 catches, 309 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the defense, whether or not they can bounce back given the potential limitations of SC at linebacker.
Yeah, so. Obviously I agree with that. For me, I'll go sort of more big picture. It's the worry is getting caught napping, getting caught taking the next three opponents not seriously, still acting like you're on a bye week. I think of the next three opponents, maybe you can get away with that against Colorado, but you can't get away with it against Arizona or Cal. Well, there are things about Arizona and Cal that can catch you. Yes. And so it really is about coming in and looking at this as an opportunity to make a statement. One of the things that is going to be written by the end of the week on fansided.com is about how USC's playoff hopes are not dead, but statements need to be made. These next 3 weeks, you need to do to these teams what Oregon did to Stanford and Arizona to make their progression look like, damn, they're beating up everybody. Go in and rout Arizona, rout Cal, rout Colorado, and you have 3 big wins on your resume for the College Football Playoff Committee to look at as they are taking into account. Well, don't fall asleep and run into a situation where you win 35-29, and then everyone's saying, "Well, USC's not."
I don't think these would be 3 wins that would get you into the playoff.
No, but
there are 3 wins. There are 3 games that could prevent you if you sleepwalk.
Yes.
The thing for SC right now that is so interesting about this season is SC has gotten to a point where the way the schedule goes, it's like there's 5 games left in the season. But all of a sudden, it's like there's a lull. And I don't want to sit here and say that SC should or will or whatever overlook Arizona, Cal, and Colorado. But the fact is that like these are the 3 easiest games on USC's schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe Cal isn't maybe Cal is akin to Fresno State-ish. Maybe
is Cal better than Stanford?
Whatever. But the point is these are 3 games where SC will be favored by double digits.
Yeah.
If not 20 plus points. And so it's very easy to sit back here as an outsider and be like, can we just fast forward to the UCLA game? Because the UCLA game is going to be like everything is going to come down to that one big game, right? But the reality is you can't do that. And so you've got to go week by week, and you got to make sure that you're showing up, and you don't think that as a football team.
But it's even more than that though, because it's 3 weeks to, number one, make a statement, prove how dominant you can be against lesser opposition, which will matter in the eyes of voters and all that kind of stuff. Number 2, continue to build up your reps. And by that, I mean, get these games done so quickly that you can start clearing benches and let guys like Rajon Davis and Chris Thompson and Corey Foreman and all those just like have at it in the second half of games and build up those reps. Let Miller Moss get some reps. Like use these as learning weeks that get you ready for the end of the season. And don't overlook Notre Dame either, because there's reasons to not overlook that game, and they're very big. And their name is Mayor.
Well, your alumni circles are probably hopping off at the chance to do those.
Oh, yeah. But it's just don't get ahead of yourself. Take care of business. Be as dominant as you can be.
Yeah,
and earn your places going later.
Touchdown USC says, will Hesse be able to stop the Wildcats tight end? And yeah, it's gonna be the big question. Tanner McLaughlin, 23 catches, 309 yards, 2 touchdowns, as we said. Those numbers not too dissimilar to what Dalton Kincaid entered with last week against Utah. So the key here is that Dalton Kincaid was Utah's best weapon, even as their backup tight end. I guess you could make the argument for Vele too at wide receiver, but Arizona has 3 young studs at receiver who are just insanely good. And McLaughlin's going to be a guy who could eat if you focus all your attention on the wide receivers. But as weird as it is to say, if that's the thing, if Delara ends up going to McLaughlin versus Cowing, Singer, and McMillan, the PTSD from the Kincaid thing is fresh. I get it, but like that's a better alternative than going up against Cowing, Singer, and McMillan.
This will be an interesting week to find out too. Is like, will they have made an adjustment to make sure that they don't get beat by another tight end, or will it just be no? That's fine. If the tight end's gonna be your target, that's what we want. The difference needs to be that we're getting to the quarterback and he's not getting out.
It's what you want in a matchup game like this.
Yeah.
Not always. Sure. Yeah. Last one comes from Jaime, who says, how many food snacking questions will you be asked today? I don't know. We haven't been asked.
We have not been asked a food snacking question.
Give us one. Okay. Here's a question. If 2 pizzas are stacked on top of each other inverted, is it a pizza or a calzone?
Ooh. Well, I think
it's... Better yet, is it a pizza or is it a stuffed pizza?
I think it's 2 slices of pizza inverted on each other. Like when you cook a calzone, you're cooking a calzone the way it is. I want to point out Lincoln's Visor in the chat pointed out that there was breaking news. USC lands 4-star edge rusher DJ Peavy for 2023. So that's big for USC. Keep up the recruiting. And I also wanted to point out Malcolm in the chat says Sierra Wright's last 2 games, 2 targets, 1 reception, 20 yards versus Utah. 4 targets, 3 receptions, 28 yards versus Wazoo. No touchdowns given up this year either. Not enough people talking about this. Yeah, Sierra Wright is having a really exceptional season for a first-time starter. Yeah. And one of the nice things about a cornerback is when you don't talk about them, preferably it's when you don't have to be talking about them. And I think Sierra Wright has done a hell of a job to, in a sort of weird, twisted way, to not have us need to be talking about him, because it's like, for instance, in an alternate universe, Damani Jackson being injured for the past couple of weeks would have been something that we would have been talking about nonstop, because what does USC do at corner, all that kind of stuff. We haven't really had to discuss Damani Jackson being injured because Sierra Wright has been the perfect partner opposite Makai Blackman. My bad. Brain fart. At corner.
Too many transfers. How do you
keep up with them? Yeah. So Sierra Wright has exceeded all of my expectations, and I think didn't we give him a Roddy too, for something? I don't know. He deserved a Roddy, the Sierra Wright award for.
I
unexpected surprises.
I joke about too many transfers, but like I went into the season honestly concerned that like, how are we gonna? There's so many new guys. How will we keep track of all these new dudes? And it hasn't been that difficult at all. So a good thing for
Yeah.
a dummy like me.
Yeah.
So.
But it is nice to see that, USC added transfers and USC added new players and recruits and all that kind of stuff. And someone like Sierra Wright could have ended up just completely forgotten. And he's more proof that, if you work hard and you convince the coaches that you're worthy of playing time, you'll get your playing time and have your chance to prove it.
Best USC celebrity athlete since, let's say, better than Little Romeo.
While we're thinking about this, I'm going to answer Mark Hoffman in the chat. Eric Gentry and Addison are game time decisions, and we would prefer that to mean resting this week if they are not needed.
Yeah, and my take on that is that they are even a game time decision after the potential of like thinking that those could be worse is a good thing for us.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. In the moment, I thought that Jordan Addison broke his hip. Like genuinely, I thought he broke his hip. Yeah.
Oh, I thought he broke his ankle.
No, Jordan Addison, because he sort of the way he fell, it was sort of like on his hip, and then he was like sort of like straight. His whole leg was like a thing.
I thought something was.
Yeah,
it did not look good either way. But that we're able to say that he's a game time decision going forward is a good thing. Absolutely. Anyways, that's gonna wrap up the pod. Our Arizona USC preview. We will be back, of course, Saturday night with the CardCast right after the game. After you watch it on your favorite channel, Pac-12 Network, head over to YouTube and we'll be live to give you our thoughts on USC and Arizona. The Trojans going to look for their 7th win of the season there in Tucson. As always, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Alicia is at Penguin of Troy. I'm at Michael Cast FS. You can follow the show at Reign of Troy on Twitter and Facebook. Email address reignoftroy@fansided.com. And that will, by the way,
we have so many questions really in the chat since we started the exit.
Sorry. Really quick. Eric says, can you recap your in-game food choices so far? Or maybe insights on what's the Arizona in-game meal? Is that meal decided by mood or opponent? Let's talk about that in the CardCast.
Yeah.
We will
discuss.
We will write that down.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it in the CardCast. So we'll be back on Saturday.
And also go Checo.
Yes. Checo, absolutely. In the Grand Prix and Sunday.
Mexico.
Yeah. All right. Until then, we will see you. See ya.
See ya.
See ya.